Let's talk about a cell you probably have in your body called the neutrophil. Well, forever, we've seen them as these kamikaze soldiers of our immune system. They rush in, they cause a ton of inflammation to kill invaders, and then they die. Simple as that. But what if that's not the end of the story? What if their final act isn't about destruction, but about making peace? We are about to turn everything we thought we knew about one of our body's most common immune cells completely on its head.
So you've got these two competing identities, right? On one side, there's the classic view, the aggressive, pro-inflammatory soldier that lives fast and dies young. But on the other side, a totally new picture is emerging, this idea of a strategic, anti-inflammatory peacekeeper, one whose influence sticks around long after the cell itself is gone. That's the huge shift we're going to unpack.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll cover the neutrophil story we all know. Then, we'll take you right into the lab for that aha moment. We'll introduce you to this new player, the LAND-V, and explain its genius strategy for shutting down inflammation. Then we'll look at the real-world impact, and finally, what this all means for the future of medicine.
Okay, so first things first. Let's set the stage with the story we've always been told. Anytime there's trouble in your body, like an infection or an injury, neutrophils are the first to show up. And trust me, they don't exactly arrive quietly.
And the numbers here are just mind-boggling. Your body is cranking out around 10 billion of these cells every single day. They're the most common white blood cell you have. But here's the crazy part. They live for less than a day. So it makes you wonder, right? Why produce so many of them just for them to immediately die?
Well, their job is messy. They release toxins, they shoot out these incredible web-like structures called nets, that's short for neutrophil extracellular traps, that literally catch bacteria. And they just straight up eat pathogens. Their entire existence has been framed as this pro-inflammatory, fight-to-the-death mission.
And that brings us to the big question. If we're making billions of these cells that have such a short fuse, is their only job really to start a fire and then get cleaned up? Or is there something else going on? Something we've been missing?
And that is exactly where this story takes a fascinating turn. This whole discovery didn't come from some grand theory. Nope, it came from scientists just watching. From a simple, totally unexpected observation under a microscope.
So you have these researchers, and they're basically just filming neutrophils in a petri dish as they get old and die. It's the kind of routine work that happens in labs all the time. But then, in the middle of all this expected cell death, they saw some of the cells doing something very, very weird. They were actively pinching off these really large bubbles.
And according to the lead researcher, this wasn't just a cell falling apart as it died. This was an active process. The cells were using up their last bits of energy to create and release these mysterious packages. It was deliberate. So the question became, what in the world are these things, and what are they for?
And that one observation led to the discovery of a completely new type of structure, a brand new player in the game of how our body controls inflammation.
So they gave them a name, LAND-Vs. It stands for Large, Aging Neutrophil-Derived Vesicles. And honestly, it's the perfect name, because it tells you everything you need to know. They're large packages, and they're released by neutrophils that are aging, not dying, with a very specific purpose, to put out the inflammatory fire.
And these things are special. For starters, they are huge, over a micron in size, which for a cellular vesicle is absolutely massive. They're actively built, not just leftover junk. But here's the real kicker. They are incredibly stable. They can survive for days after the neutrophil that made them is long gone. They are, quite literally, a lasting legacy.
Okay, so how do these little packages actually work as peacekeepers? Well, it turns out they have this brilliant two-step plan that acts like a biological off switch for inflammation. First, we've got to understand what they're targeting. It's called the complement system. The easiest way to think about it is like the immune system's fire alarm. Once it gets pulled, it sets off this massive chain reaction of inflammation. It's super important for fighting infections, but if that alarm keeps ringing, it starts causing a lot of damage. So here's how they shut it off. Now this diagram looks a bit technical, but the core idea is actually super elegant. LAND-Vs are covered in a protein called CD55. Normally, the complement system sets off a chain reaction, right? Well, the LAND-V uses that CD55 protein to act like a circuit breaker. It floats over, intercepts a key piece of the alarm system, and just deactivates it. By stopping that one step, it shuts the whole alarm down before it spirals out of control.
So the strategy is genius, right? Step 1, disarm the alarm. But what good is that if you just get eaten up by other immune cells right away? That's where step 2 comes in. The LAND-Vs also have do not eat me signals all over their surface. It's basically an invisibility cloak that lets them sneak around the battlefield and do their job without being taken out.
Okay, so this mechanism is fascinating, for sure. But does it actually work in a living, breathing creature? Let's take a look at how this all translates from the lab into actual health outcomes.
And the results were just incredible. In mice with a really severe, often deadly bacterial pneumonia, just a single dose of these LAND-Vs made a huge difference. You can see it here. It dramatically reduced lung inflammation, it prevented tissue damage, and most importantly, more of the mice survived. It's a huge deal.
But this isn't just a mouse story. This is where it gets incredibly relevant for all of us. Researchers looked at blood samples from patients with COVID-19, and they found a direct link. The patients who had milder cases of the disease had way more of these peacekeeper LAND-Vs floating around in their blood. A lack of them was connected to a much worse outcome.
So, this discovery isn't just some small update for a biology textbook. It's forcing us to completely rethink a major chapter on how our bodies heal, on how inflammation actually gets resolved. So let's just put it side by side. The old view was that the neutrophil is just an aggressive fighter that lives fast and dies, and that cleaning up inflammation was just a passive cleanup job for other cells. The new view? The neutrophil is the strategic operator that purposely leaves behind a legacy of peace. And resolving inflammation is an active process directed by the very same cells that started the fight in the first place.
And this leaves us with a really profound question. For decades, we've been looking for outside drugs to shut down inflammation. But what if the best solution was inside of us this whole time? What if we could learn to harness these natural peacekeepers, this final, wise act of an aging cell, to create a whole new generation of treatments for inflammatory diseases? It seems the neutrophil story is just getting started.